All right, Isaiah. So I'm gonna just go over the entire lesson, and hopefully this helps your understanding of it. All right. So for the warm up, the first question, how we want to approach it and attack it, is we know the equation for a circle is this, right? And so I don't want it. Let me select smaller size. There we go. All right. So now we got x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, right? So since we know that that's the equation for a circle, now we can start to find the radius and then the center point, right? The center point is h comma k, right? So now all we do is pay attention to the equation that we have up here. We have 4 in the same place our h is, and then we have 2 in the same place our k is. It's not positive 4, it's not negative 4, negative 2, because there's a negative in the equation. So this is a positive 4 and a positive 2, right? So our coordinate point will be 4, comma, 2 for our center, right? And then for the radius, we have 25 is in the same position as r squared. So we set r squared equal to 25. And we know in order to get rid of a radical, we got to take the square root of it. What we do to one side, we do to the other. So r in turn is equal to 5, right? All right, now for the second question, you want to essentially do the same thing, right? Because we're looking for the radius and the center point, right? So we have the same equation. And the reason why I just keep writing it is because the more you write it and see it, the better chances are you're going to memorize it, right? So every time I see an equation, I see a problem as such, I always just go ahead and write the formula again so I can commit it to memory, right? And so my center point will be my h comma k, right? So I got h comma k. That's equal to 3, 0, right? So we got 3, comma 0. Don't mind my 3, it look a little funky, right? So now I know that's my center point. Now, the radius, as you see, I can't just count the line. So I'll actually have to use the distance formula, right? How do I do that? I know that my other point is at 1, negative 2. So I got 1 and a negative 2. So now I need to use the distance formula, right? So the distance formula is going to be this side of the equation. So my radius is going to be equal to the square root of x minus h. Well, my h is 3, my x is 1. So the difference from 3 to 1 would be 2. So I'm going to square that. The difference from 2 and 0 is 2, right? I know you're probably sitting there thinking, hey, Mr. G, that's a negative 2 minus the 0, which is a negative 2. But if I square negative 2, it's going to give me a positive 4. If I square a positive 2, it's going to give me a positive 4. So that's why I always work with positives once I find the difference between these values, right? So 2 squared plus 2 squared will give me a square root of 8. Now, I can stop there if I want to. However, I want to be able to know how to break down 8, right? So I know 8 is 4 times 2, and this is 2 squared times 2. Now, remember, this is a square root of 8. So it's a square root of 4 times 2 is a square root of 2 squared times 2. Well, remember over here, when we took the square root of a square, it canceled it out. So it's the same thing here. We're taking the square root of a square, so we end up with 2 square root of 2 as our simplified answer. Now, if I'm saying what's the radius, it's still square root of 8, right? I could put square root of 8 for the sake of answering this question, right? All right, now when it comes down to similarity, we want to be able to figure out some ratios. So some ratios I can take off the top of my head. You always divide an image by your pre-image for your ratios, right? We learned that from dilation from early on this year. So the ratio I will have is little r, lowercase r over capital R. I will have lowercase d over capital D. I will have lowercase s over capital S. I will have lowercase a over capital A. And then I will have lowercase c over capital C. So those are my 5 equivalent ratios, right? So on the next slide, it talks about, okay, now let's find the information for those equivalent ratios. So again, I have lowercase r over capital R, lowercase c over capital C, lowercase d over capital D, lowercase a over capital A, and lowercase s over capital S, right? All right, so now we know that S, which is our sector, right? So the area of our sector, right? So our S is going to be, well, no, let me write it in a way that we know it and remember it, right? So the area of the sector equation is N over 360. Our N is 30 degrees. And then it's the radius. So the smaller one, our radius is 2. So we got 2 squared pi, right? That's going to give us 30 over 360. That's 3 divided by 36 times 4. So 4 times 3 will give us 12. 12 divided by 36 will give me pi over 3, right? Because 12 goes into 36 3 times, right? So for my little s, it would be pi over 3. Now, the only thing changes here to find the other one is my radius, right? So my radius for this one will end up being 8 squared, right? Which will give me 64. Well, 64 times 3 is a rather large number. And so that rather large number is going to end up giving me a fraction of 4 over 3. You can do the math on your own to be able to find out how many times 64 is times 3. And then that number divided by 36. And you'll end up with 4 over 3 pi. So my ratio here will end up being 4 pi over 3. And the reason why I'm not doing some of these simple calculations is because I don't want to take a whole lot of time on the explanation piece. Right. All right. Now going over some of these smaller ones, the radius, of course, is 2 over 8. The circumference is 2 pi r. So 2 times 2 will give me 4 pi. 8 times 2 will give me 16 pi. Right. Diameter is the radius times 2. So I got 4 and 16 here. Right. Arc length is something similar. Right. So arc length. So our lowercase a will be 30 divided by 360 times 2r pi. Well, my r in this case will be 2. So that's 4 again. The zeros cancel out. So that's 12 over that. So I end up with pi over 3 for this one, right? Now for my A, for my capital A, I end up with 2 times 8, right? Which will give me 16. And then you multiply 16 times 3, 4 over 3, right? And so I was mistaken. This one is 16 pi over 3. So 64 times 3 divided by 36 will give you 16 over 3 pi. 16 pi over 3, right? So these are all the answers for this slide. All right, now let's move on to equation of a circle. So equation of a circle, again, like I said in the warm-up, this will give us the distance, or the radius will give us the square root of x minus h squared, excuse me, plus y minus k squared. And that will give us the distance between the center point and the edge of the circle, or the circumference. So let's walk through a couple problems that's going to give us just that, right? So again, just like the warm-up problem, this is my h, this is my k, this is my r squared. So again, until we understand the formula fully, we want to be able to write this down as many times as we can so that we can commit it to memory, right? So in order to find the radius, I need the center point, right? My center point for this will end up being 8, comma 4, right? 8 is my h, 4 is my k, right? So that means since my center point is 8, comma 4, that's what I have. Now the radius, r squared, is equal to 64. I take the square root of both sides, and I know that r is equal to 8, right? So that's that example, right? The next one says, what is the radius and the equation of the circle? So again, the equation, we're going to keep writing this down until we commit it to memory. X minus h plus y minus k squared equals r squared. And so now this one, you're given 2 coordinate points, right? The first step is to find the radius, right? So we got center point. What's my center point? What is that coordinate, right? That is h, comma, k, right? Well, this center point is already labeled for us. It's sitting at 0, comma 4, right? So 0, comma 4. Now my other point, now I know it's a lot of other points on this graph, but my other point will be labeled as x, comma, y. And so then now, as I write this other point, I'm going to choose this one. If this is at 4, 5, 6, 7, that's not quite on the line. So I want to find one that's quite on a line. Doesn't look like we have one distinctly on a line, right? So now what we must do is use the information that they gave us. They say this point is at 7, comma 4, right? So 7, comma 4. Notice that these are in increments of 2. So 2, 4, 6, 8. So this halfway mark right here is at 7. So this point right here is at 7, comma 4. So I'm going to just use that coordinate point, right? So now when I calculate the radius, I'm taking the difference of my x and h and k and y, right? So again, this distance formula will be just like the equation of a circle. X minus 8 h squared plus y minus k squared. And what I come to find out is that 0 minus 7 will give me 7 squared. And then 4 minus 4 will give me a 0 squared. Well, that's just equal to the square root of 7 squared. 7 squared is 49. Square root of 7 squared will give us 7, not 49. Wow. Right? Because remember, square roots cancel squares. So my radius here is 7. So when I write this equation, I'm going to use my center point, which is my H and K. My H is 0, right? My K is 4, right? R squared would end up being 49 because 7 squared is 49. Well, when I see this, I know I can rewrite this as x squared plus y minus 4 squared equal to 49, right? All right, now for my proofs. Um, my proofs, this is where we're going to start at in the next class. So I'm going to stop the video here. So hopefully this helped give you an understanding on how to look at everything. If it does not, if you need a little bit further clarity, um, watch the video a couple times until you get it. Do the examples, do the assignment that's in Google Classroom so that you can get a better perspective, angle, and all that jazz. And if after a day, if it still doesn't make sense to you, just let me know. So after today, tomorrow, once we get in class, or tomorrow morning, just send me an email saying, "Hey, Mr. G, can you briefly go over this again so that it makes sense to me?" And I'll specifically, address you in class through the chat to make sure that you do understand what's going on. But again, like always, if you got any questions, just let me know.